So for today's agenda, I'm trying to keep it nice and simple. First, I will look at what is governance as it relates to SharePoint and why should you care. And I think the latter half of the question is more important than the first. Two, what are the specific SharePoint related governance features and compliance features? So we'll take a quick peek at some of the higher level features and functionalities. We won't be going into too much of a detail, but we'll look at things like e-discovery features, information rights management, site policies and procedures, and they'll talk a little bit about that, and also how to set some of those features up. The biggest roadblock I see with most people is, hey, we talk about IRM and stuff, where the heck do I see it? So it's really simple to enable it and use it, so we'll talk a little bit about how to set things up and dive into demo on IRM and site policies and e-discovery features. So it's really interesting when you talk about it and when you see it in action. Hopefully you guys get a kick out of it as the first time that I went through it. And hopefully you find this an educational session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it down as it comes to your mind. We will take up all questions towards the end of the presentation and move forward from there. All right, let's keep moving. So what is SharePoint governance? So in a nutshell, governance revolves around 4 topics. So it's about people, process, technology, and policies. So governance as it relates to SharePoint is about setting up policies, roles, responsibilities, and processes that can help an organization on its own drive its different business divisions with minimal IT support. So the idea behind the SharePoint governance and compliance features is, 1, to reduce risk and increase security, and 2 is to move forward with the idea of self-service SharePoint sites, self-service BI, and enable department owners and end users to use SharePoint features and functionalities without relying on other technical tools or IT staff, but give IT the control to restrict the environment so it's on that it's informational and you don't have to second guess. If you can upload a file and it's in the document library, you can be rest assured that your document has passed a set of quality checks. You can be sure that it's properly channeled with versioning and other IRM-related features without you specifically having to do anything or worry about it. So the biggest question is, why is governance so important? And initially I started putting a couple of slides together to talk about the importance of governance and why you should care, but I found this XKCD comic that I think pretty much summarizes what a SharePoint environment could look like without governance. So you don't want to be the guy at the bottom. So we're going to try, and if you're on the bottom of the heap right now, we're going to try and get you out of there. And if you haven't watched Fight Club, it's a great movie. You should watch it now. Before we talk about governance features, I think it's important to step back a little bit and talk about process management and overall SharePoint and business structure needed for an effective SharePoint governance execution. And I think that's probably a big deal, considering it's easy enough to get accumulated with the SharePoint specific government features, but if you don't have the proper business backing and the executive sponsorship to properly drive that implementation, we would be back to square one. So it's important to understand that for a successful SharePoint implementation, there has to be a synergy between the business and IT. So I put out a couple of points here, and some of which was derived from the Microsoft best practices and guidelines, and it revolves around really 2 key objectives. So first off, as we discussed, a SharePoint deployment, a successful SharePoint deployment starts with the cooperation from the IT and the business. And the idea behind that is the SharePoint responsibilities is traditionally seen as an IT-only process. But without creating a let's say for the purpose of this discussion, like a governance board, or as Microsoft likes to call it, a steering committee of power users, department owners, who can better drive that discussion forward. So you have a governance board that sets rules and policies, and the IT team can effectively execute it based on proper business rules and regulations. We can't quite give that power to individual users. We can't let excuse me, an it's not a pure IT function. So I think the step number one to implement proper governance and compliance regulations is form a government board. Now get together your top power users, your department owners, and key business executives and set a strategy for establishing the rules and policies necessary. And in some organizations, this could be broadly brought under the umbrella of information management. So if you have an external website or a e-commerce based business model, chances are you already have a pretty good information management team. So the best way to segue into SharePoint side of the story is to expand that division to include the SharePoint intranet environment and publishing sites based off of it. If you are a smaller establishment, you might want to just leverage your existing collaboration team, like a creative department, and take it from that side of things. So that's step number one. Long term, the IT side of the story can back off, and the board in itself would manage the life cycle of the individual assets in SharePoint, things like documents and SharePoint sites and alerts and calendar entries. And the policies and regulations would be primarily derived from the governance board, which we will establish initially through a cooperation between the technical and business staff. Second, we need to establish proper strategic policies such as change management, change management adoption policies, have proper workflows and themes put in place to drive the adoption forward. So this raises a whole bunch of questions, and we'll take a look at that in the next couple of slides. We talked about majority of these comments. So the first thing to keep in mind is a one-size-fits-all rule does not apply to SharePoint. That's the biggest mistake. We cannot have a global rule that states, you know what, let's make sure that any site that's not used in 1 year must be deleted. Or our document enterprise archiving strategy is to have a revisioning approach at a monthly level, or a versioning approach that requires all pages to be published at a certain interval. I would recommend discouraging away from a model where we have a one rule policy, and that's primarily because SharePoint by itself has multiple types of sites and portals. So for instance, let's take a look at this pyramid, for instance. Bottom to top is less regulation to more regulation. So for My Sites, which are, for those who are new to the My Sites feature, is a feature you can enable for individuals to have the ability to have their own little world in your SharePoint deployment, where they can upload their own documents, their own files. They can share documents with other users in their My Sites portal. So chances are you do not want to apply the same rules and regulations that you would apply to a business department site to a My Site portal. So you would have a different policy template set for My Sites. You'd have a different policy set for project sites, and project site in this context is considered as a project team site who are responsible for their project. So chances are you want to let the project team handle their site the best way they think is fit. But collaboration sites, that's think department sites, are now higher up in the chain and may require more vigilant properties. It may require more restrictions because it serves a wider view of audience, and you want to make sure that those kinds of sites with a wider adoption rate have better restriction and better insight to the IT team. Business unit portals, now we're getting into external facing sites or things like a customer portal. So if you have a department site and a corresponding product that is available to an end user or a customer or a separate business unit, chances are those kinds of sites need to be locked down. Or if you have an enterprise site or an internet site based off of SharePoint, which is completely externally visible, it requires a very, very extensive and the full power of the policies and compliance regulations. And we'll take a look at how to set some of those things up shortly. So that's step number one, is determining the strategy and the planning necessary for a exhaustive governance and compliance approach. Once you've done that, let's look at how to execute it from a department level. So I've kind of split this into two, again, based on Microsoft best practices. One is, what are the business-focused activities? And the second, what would be ID-focused activities? So from a business standpoint, the broader view of changes revolves around managing change requests, performing business analysis, ensuring readiness materials, monitoring the adoption of A, rules and regulations, B, hey, are our end users properly using the site? Are they using it at all? And you could track these metrics and details using the SharePoint usage and analytics, or if you have a BI site, you could track these kinds of metrics using Power Pivot executive dashboards, and there's multiple ways to track those levels of information. Two, from a IT standpoint, to support these principles, you would need a proper architecture and proper SLA levels that is determined by the business but executed by IT. IT is also responsible for governing all SharePoint apps and developments. So a new feature functionality has to be approved by IT and properly regulated into the SharePoint ecosystem for business users to consume. And that goes hand in hand with the readiness model, because you do not want a technical piece of functionality to be added into your site as a one-off scenario. You want a piece of functionality to be modular and scalable across multiple sites and have that fully approved by IT, and let the business add that piece of functionality to your site versus adding it on a one-off scenario. And the last four boxes are more for monitoring and deployment. So from a business standpoint, the adoption, business transformation, and marketing communication is key to ensuring that your sites are kept alive, and the content and information that you put on there will continue to drive your end users to use your site and consume resources in the manner that you see fit. For instance, if you have announcements and portal sites, there will be a governance that will be tightly regulated in areas where there would be a public exposure in terms of readership. And finally, we would have the IT team take care of the technical side of things, like monitoring issues with the sites, ensuring proper communication channels for downtime, new functionality additions, removals, and other security violations, things of that nature. So having that structure put in place prior to even beginning to talk about and implementing governance and compliance features is key to a successful adoption. And we'll take a look at that. So SharePoint Server 2013 and even Office 365 technically extends compliance beyond just content. So for instance, in IRM, enabling self-service and ensuring that the self-service features adhere to corporate policy, as an IT team can define corporate-wide IRM policies and apply them to a top-level site. So if you have a department site, you can have a master IRM policy apply to a department and have all of your sub-sites under that department automatically inherit that. So it's not just managing content as it relates to a document. We are talking about site-wide and department-wide or site collection-wide policies. These built-in policies would technically help confidential information by an intuitive user experience. For instance, the e-discovery feature. It's not a technical feature per se, because you as an end user can also consume it very easily using a graphical user interface on SharePoint versus going to your IT to generate a new EDRM model. And we will look at all that in just a second. So having that GUI-based interface for non-technical users to audit and create discovery sets on their own helps in driving the adoption of compliance features. Traditionally, sensitive information was controlled by setting up network level restrictions or site level restrictions. Now with SharePoint IRM features, we technically have the ability to have more in-depth restrictions by, let's say, by an item. So if you have a document library with a specific document, you could set up an encryption for that individual document. You could have that document shared to specific users, and you could have an entire document library set to an encryption. So anytime a user uploads a new document to that library, as long as the user has permission to access that library, any document that they upload to that library would be automatically encrypted. And we'll take a look at that in one of our demos as well. Lastly, data retention is very, very important, and you want to make sure that, and this is the biggest problem with most SharePoint deployments, is stale data and old data and what I like to call data scoping. You must have heard of scope creep as it relates to requirements, and the same can be applied to SharePoint data and content. After a certain period of time, you would see that the data in itself in SharePoint sites continues to grow at an exponential rate, and you quickly begin to lose control of your data. And this is a major problem with most SharePoint deployments, is the continuous growth and unregulated growth of data. And there are certain tactics we could use to purge that, which is one way of phrasing it, or two, setting up policies to, for instance, if a site is not, or a site or a document or a piece of content is not used for X amount of time, consider deleting it. Have the IT and the governance board set a set of policies at the site collection level, and individual site owners and department owners can then determine which policy to apply to their site. So that's kind of interesting, because as at the corporate wide, you can set X amount of policies that you think would best fit with your growth needs and looking into the future, but you're still able to give individual departments the ability to control their policies by allowing them to choose from a list of templates versus forcing a corporate-wide policy. Let's take a quick look at some specific SharePoint features to help achieve some of these goals. First, I want to spend some time working with information rights management, and we won't be going into an exhaustive detail of IRM. We will take a look at how to enable it, how to apply that to a specific document library, and what the end result of that would look like, and take a look at a couple of options of IRM as it relates to a document library. So real quick, before we get into IRM, step number one is how to enable IRM, because that's kind of the biggest question. So I had customers ask me, I keep reading about IRM features, but I can't see it. I just can't see the options. So that's kind of a common request that we get. So I wanted to spend some time covering the setting up of IRM in your SharePoint environment. So let's, I'm switching to my browser window. Hopefully you guys can see it. hang on a second. There we go. I'm going to give it just a second. All right. Please let me know if you are not able to see my browser. All right, no questions, so I'm going to assume you can. Step number one, so I'm looking at this from Office 365 interface, but most of what I show you should apply to an on-premise installation as well. So if you have an Office 365 based SharePoint, step number one is to go into your admin portal. So right off the bat, if you're not a Office 365 SharePoint admin, you will not see this interface. Go into Office 365, not SharePoint just yet, and this is the biggest catch that most people miss. You want to go in Service Settings under Rights Management, and well, first off, you would see two types of right management. So there's an Azure Rights Management. So if you have scaled your SharePoint deployment to Windows Azure, and if you have enabled Active Directory Federation, and you have implemented single sign-on with Azure Active Directory and SharePoint, it gives you some additional set of features, but we're not getting into that level of detail just yet. I'm clicking on Manage under Rights Management in Office 365. So in my screen, you have seen that I've already enabled Rights Management, but if you haven't, this would be an Enable button, so you got to click that and enable Rights Management. So that's step number one. Step two, in the same admin menu, go ahead and click on SharePoint. And under SharePoint, navigate to Records Management. Whoops, I'm sorry, navigate to Settings. And under Settings, you would see that I have already enabled IRM, but the default setting is do not use IRM for this tenant. So that's not really sure why that's a default, but that is a default. So you would have to specifically come in here after enabling it in Office 365 Master Settings, then come in here and make sure the use the IRM service specified in your configuration radio button is checked. Once that's checked, you'd see this little button pop up, and you would have to then click on this to ensure that IRM features are properly propagated. So when I clicked on the refresh IRM settings, you could see that we have successfully refreshed your settings. So just a little tip right there. I want to make sure that you all know how to get started with IRM. Step number two is, I think we skipped over a slide in the process. Step number two, once you have enabled, is to now systematically enable IRM features on a list or a library or at any level you choose to. For this demo though, we are going to try and enable this to a document library and see some of the options that we could see as a result of it. Well, let's go ahead and navigate to a SharePoint site. All right, I am at the engineering SharePoint site. So this is a Office 365 based site, but everything I'm going to show you from here, even from an interface standpoint, should be exactly the same in SharePoint 2013 installation. So this is a homepage of my engineering site. You want to go into Site Setting, click on the little gear icon, go into Site Settings. Well, before that, I'm sorry, we should select the document. So, well, for the purpose of this demo, I think it'd be better to just work from a document library standpoint. So I'm going into a document library, and this could be any document library there, or even a list. So it's not tied into just a document, to just document libraries. In the document library, once I've navigated to it, I can then hit on Library Settings from the ribbon menu. Please let me know if I'm going too fast. All right. So you could see that under permissions and management there's a new option, information rights management. So keep in mind, if you do not see this option, please go back and do step number 1, which is enabling IRM for your Office 365 tenant and enabling it for in Office 365 IRM side. Once you've done that, you'd see this option. By clicking on it, you could see that I have the ability to apply IRM policies to this document library. So by default this would be blank, but I have already created one policy and I just call it IRM. But the interesting bits are in the options. So for my setting for this library, I have only enabled one option, which is do not allow users to upload documents that do not support IRM. So if a user is attempting to upload a document that cannot be encrypted for whatever reason, then he cannot upload that document. Let's take a look at some of the other options. So some of the interesting options are stop restricting access to this library at a specified time. So that's interesting because you could set a block. For instance, this could be a good legal feature. If you have a court case and there's an X amount of period where you can apply documents to, and you want to freeze a document library at a certain point of time and not enable users to add additional document, that's one way of doing it. You could also achieve the same objective using e-discovery, which we will look at in just a minute. So this is an additional option. You could also have an option to prevent people from opening it in the browser, which would force any clicks on the documents in the library in itself to open on your local desktop office or download it. These options might be more interesting to you. So you can enable or disable for the ability for viewers to print, run scripts, write to a copy of it, make sure the document expires after a download, so that should be very useful, and even make sure that the document is shared in a correct fashion. So once I have enabled IRM on a document library, it's interesting to note that this setting that I've enabled here will automatically transfer over to Word documents or any Office documents if I attempt to save it to this library. So I'm going to go back to the document list. Just going to copy this URL and I'll fire up my desktop Word. I'm going to create a new blank document and going to save as, browse. Yeah, there's multiple ways you could get to this location. I just decided to copy paste the actual link to that document library. Again, stop me if you think I'm going too fast. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it down. All right. Well, let's do this. All right. I will call this encrypted document. Hit save. So once I've done that, well, nothing really special happens to the document itself from my viewpoint, but if I go into File, Information, you'd see there's a couple of options here. So some of these options are built into Word in itself, but you'd see additional options here. For instance, restrict access to specific groups. So Contoso, confidential, view only, these are groups and settings that's coming from my SharePoint site. So if you haven't noticed, the name of my SharePoint site is, let me show you here real quick, is Contoso. So we are attempting to save documents to this SharePoint site, and that's the groups that this is pulling it off of from. So right now I'm leaving it at unrestricted access, but I could go ahead and put it to restricted access and specifically target certain users to look at this document. And keep in mind, even if I copy paste this document to if I give this document to you physically, you should still be in this group to even open this up, because this document is encrypted. And there's two levels that you can do this as. One is for read-only. So if you would like to give the ability for users to just read your document without making changes, then this is your option. If you'd like to give access to users to change the document as well as read, then you could add these users here. And the users and groups that you see here are directly coming off of from SharePoint. So you could also, you would have to have your users in your Active Directory and in SharePoint before you can use these options. So I had more options to kind of just show you a couple more options here. So obviously I am the admin user and I have full access, but I can choose to segregate different access level to different users with the same screen. So hopefully that was informational as far as how to enable IRM and start using some of the basic features. One quick question that I'm just reading off of the chat: is this feature available in SharePoint 2013? I'm assuming you mean if it's available in SharePoint 2013 on premise. The answer is yes, it is. I believe it's also available in 2010. There's been a couple of enhancements to IRM in 2013. All right, moving forward. So from an IRM standpoint, that's the end of that demo. There's a couple more features as relates to IRM. For instance, the new content management interoperability services CMIS provider has some additional functionalities in 2013. You could set up different sites and objects with different policies. For instance, sites and maybe even large objects require that the users comply with a specific usage policy as relates to specific items with a specific condition. You could also apply policies and procedures to even mailboxes. So these are not just limited to SharePoint sites and documents in itself. You could have Exchange integration with SharePoint, have mailboxes integrated into SharePoint, and apply similar IRM policies to mailboxes as well. So I want to quickly switch gears and take a look at e-discovery features, which I think is very useful from a legal and audit standpoint. And even from a general discovery, filtering, and searching standpoint as well, it's very useful. So the e-discovery features in 2013 kind of has 4 different components to it. Well, one, the first view that you get is a case manager. So every discovery request that you can start with SharePoint is considered a case. So the step number 1 is you'd go into an e-discovery portal and you will start a new case, apply some filters, add some libraries to monitor, and then you can apply restrictions and keywords to filter by them on, and it would continue to monitor them. Second is enterprise-wide access. So this is in regards to 2 specific features. One is the fact that e-discovery features apply SharePoint site-wide, so it's not limited to a specific document, library, or even a site. You could have a SharePoint enterprise-wide e-discovery search setup. And the second part of that equation is, like we talked about in IRM features, the e-discovery features are not just limited to SharePoint. It also applies to mailboxes and other integration points. The third feature is the ability to create freezes and holds. So once you set up a couple of libraries to monitor and optionally apply some filters to it, you now have the ability to hold that specific search set and that document set and freeze it. So this is useful from a legal standpoint, to go back in time, look at the state of certain document libraries at a certain point of time, and maybe use it as a legal defense or from an audit standpoint, ensure that your departments and organization-wide is complying with standards and compliance features that you've set up, and the in-place holds will allow you to do that. And last is the ability to derive interesting statistics out of it. So we'll show you some statistics for today, but there's a lot of stuff that you can pull off of from. For instance, you could apply different search terms and figure out the total number of results derived from a search term. So we'll look at that, and there's a bunch of more analytics that is supported in eDiscovery 2013. So let's now switch gears again and dive into a demo. So let me dial back here. All right, so I've navigated to a Legal Discovery Center. I'm going to wait just a second for the screen to catch up to everyone. All right, so this is technically a SharePoint site. So once eDiscovery features are enabled, and this is pretty easy to enable, so I'm not really going into a demo on how to enable these features. More than likely, you have eDiscovery features in your installation, and it's also available in Office 365, which is where we are running this off of. So this is just a SharePoint landing page. Step number one is, as you can see, there's not much you can do from this page, is to create a new case. So like I said, this is the case manager system of eDiscovery, so everything starts with a case. For the purpose of this demo, I have a bunch of cases created already. So the Northwind Traders is one such case. So first off, you could see that the whole eDiscovery case is divided into two sections. Section number one is identify and hold. So this is where you would set up which libraries to monitor, which mailboxes to monitor, and set the search terms here. And you also have the ability to then put up hold requests on the libraries that you filtered off from. So let's take a look at a hold request that I've already created. So I have a Northwind hold, and top to bottom. So first off is you could give any name you like for this case set. This is one of many holds that you can apply. So in any given case, you can have unlimited number of holds and search and exports. So I've only created one, and it's called Northwind hold, and I can add multiple sources to it. So currently I just have a document library and a discussion board, and they're both SharePoint types. So the source type could also be exchanged for mailboxes. So let's take a look at how the interface looks like to add a new source. So you could see that first off it's mailboxes. So if you have Exchange integration, or if you're in Office 365 with SharePoint and Exchange license, you could just type in names of users that have a mailbox and they would populate here. I've added two, but you could add multiple document libraries or lists or discussion boards. And this just takes a URL. Let's do this. All right, so I added in the engineering documents. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, just took a second. All right, so I have three different document libraries and discussion boards and lists. And right off the bat, you could see some statistics here. One is the total number of items across all three of these items are 175. If you click on the little ellipsis, it will show further details. So my last added document library has got about 66 items totaling 33 megabytes, and it gives you total size. So keep this number in mind, and I can do a search. For instance, I'll try and find a keyword of well, finance. So as I did that search, you could see that there's only one item across all three that matched it. Let's try engineering. Alright, there's quite a bit more because obviously we just added in this engineering document library, so I'm pretty sure the engineering keyword is present multiple times across these documents. So once you've set up your filters and your search terms and everything, you can then click on Enable in Place Hold. Once you do that, these three document libraries with this specific filter set will be put on hold and frozen. But I'm not going to do that just yet. Let's move into the second part of the equation. So once you have a bunch of holds set up, you can further refine and query off of them. So I created a Northwind audit query. So the business scenario of this would be you'd create a bunch of holds, and then you'd want to now derive an audit table based off of it. So you could see that the sources for this query is tied into the hold that I placed in the previous step, which is why you could see there's three special libraries. And since I did not add any mailboxes, it does not show any items under the mailbox. But if I hit SharePoint, it shows me a whole bunch of items here. So all of these are documents that is derived from these three holds that I placed. And if you expand the query statistics, you could see a lot more detail. Well, I guess we're already looking at the detail. And in this query, we could refine the initial search term, the initial filter set from the hold with further refining. So let's take a look at how some of those would look like. All right. Looks like it does not want to open. Let's refresh that page real quick. All right. Well, for the purpose of now, we've got just a Northwind search query. And let's try and change it slightly. Alright, so we did know that from the initial filter there was only one item with finance in it, and that's trade research, and this is the only item that's displayed. So once you've got your filtering and refined search set up and you're happy with the results, you could then export it directly off of this. So this export is interesting. It's not a traditional document library export. So the format output of this export is EDRM, and that stands for Electronic Discovery Reference Models. So EDRM is an industry-wide standard, which is, because it's industry-wide standard, you do not even need to use Microsoft-specific tools to open this case set and look into the results. You could use third-party tools to analyze the contents of your e-discovery set. So hopefully you gain a little bit of knowledge on how to use e-discovery and case features in SharePoint. And the e-discovery features also is tied into APIs. So if you have a technical team on board, you could use specific APIs to further manipulate this a little bit. And there's some interesting features available to the API as well. All right, let's switch back into our presentation. So it looks like I've shown you a whole bunch of fairly detailed and complex SharePoint features. As Jeremy Clarkson, Top Gear, would say, what's the point of all this then? Well, the advantages from setting these policies and procedures right from the get-go, well, one, ensures that your SharePoint environment remains clean and compliant with future documents and other sites and content that you add, so it continues to grow at a controlled rate and making sure it's in complying with all of your existing policies. And two, it frees up your technical staff from supporting SharePoint infrastructure related tasks versus helping users helping users set up specific feature requests or document library related requests versus doing stuff that can actually improve the environment. So having these features that built in from the get-go enables your IT staff to focus on bigger and better things. And keep in mind, this is a huge advantage to have a nice streamlined SharePoint environment when you go into an upgrade or migration. It's a lot easier to upgrade or migrate a SharePoint environment with controlled and fairly structured environment versus an organically grown SharePoint environment, and that's the polite version of that. So hopefully you've gleaned some knowledge off of this presentation. Obviously we have barely scratched the surface of some of the more advanced features of compliance and governance features in SharePoint. Maybe at a later point of time, if you think it's more useful to get into a little bit more detail, please do let us know. But for this presentation, we have reached its climax. I thank you for attending it. And if you have any questions, that's Greek for questions, we will take them now. So while you're gathering up your questions, I do want to run some polls by you guys. But please feel free to type questions into the chat. This time you should be seeing the questions on your screen. Please let me know if it's not refreshing in. All right, excellent. Gonna run a couple of more questions by you. So one of the other questions is, will we get a copy of this presentation? I believe so. We could send over the slides in itself, and I believe we have a recording that will be uploaded onto our website. So hopefully we should be able to provide you with the link. Wow, very little questions. Either I'm a great presentator or you're an incredibly attentive audience. Oh, that's great. I think this might be the first poll that I've gotten where no one is on 27 or 23. So 2010, 2013 is when the some of the major governance and IRM features start to take off. So most of what I showed you today should be available in 2010 as well. And all of it is available in on-premise 2013 and Office 365. So that's great that you're in one of the more later versions. And last question of the day. Well, this is also an interesting metric. Looks like most of the users are interested in implementing compliance and governance features, at least in some fashion, and that's great. The hardest part about setting some of these things up is the get-go. It's the first step to creating this environment that has got the highest friction. So that's great that you'd like to try and implement some of these features. I will close out the polls. Thank you very much for taking the time to complete them. So we are still open for questions, but if there are no questions, we will wind up this presentation for today. Again, thank you for carving up some time Tuesday morning to attend this presentation. We should have another topic up this next month Tuesday. If you have a specific topic that you're interested in, feel free to send those in on the feedback form that will be following this presentation. But until then, thanks again for attending the presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.